Hello, my friends. Good to see you. Chapter 13, Lesson 1 here today. And we're talking about something new, the Cold War. And we're going to be doing that in more detail, talking about how a former ally, the Soviet Union, becomes an enemy of the United States of America. And throughout all of this, what we're going to find is an essential question that is based upon this concept here. How does the Cold War shape post-war international relations? And remember here that what we're talking about, just a refresher from what we've discussed in the past, the Cold War is not a war with actual battles. It's a war between different ideas, between democracy on one side of the equation and communism on the other. And remind you here, as you take a look at this, that democracy, people will choose the government versus in a communist dictatorship where the government dictatorship, usually in the control of one person with a small group of people, is going to be controlling everything. We're going to also see the capitalist economy, laissez-faire, private property, profit, freedom to make choice, all those kinds of things compared to the communist economy where the government controls everything again. We'll see a number of countries like the United States, France, Britain, West Germany, all being democracies, while we'll also see a number of states like Poland, Romania, Hungary, East Germany, the Soviet Union, all be communist in nature. What we need to realize here is that from this point forward in all of world history, at least from our point of view, the West becomes the name for any of the groups of democracies that stand with us and live in a similar way. And the East will become all of those countries in Eastern Europe. Now, that being said, that reminder out of the way, what will we see here in terms of an answer to that question? And that answer is going to be that from this point forward, every major international relationship and event that we'll have here is now a war between these two ideas, between communism and democracy. Whether it's the United Nations preventing hot wars or any other kind of conflict that might erupt, we're going to see this tension between these two sides. Democracy on one side, communism on the other. So, as we approach the Cold War, we have to remember that both sides have different things that they want. I want one thing, Mrs. Davenport wants another. She might want bacon-loaded cheese fries. I might want super spicy buffalo wings. Let's take a look here at what the two sides in the Cold War want. What about the communist side, the Soviet side? The Soviets have several different desires. You can see them there. We want a Germany that's not going to repeat and create a third world war. They've already played major parts in two. We don't need them playing a part in a third. We're going to want to see the Soviets control the countries between the USSR and Germany. So that's going to want them to control countries like Poland and East Germany and Czechoslovakia and Hungary and Austria and Romania, Yugoslavia. The fear, of course, here is that one day Germany might get it in its mind that it wants to create a third war, and the Soviets don't want to be right next door. So, they want to be sure that the countries between Germany and the Soviets are under their control to keep the Germans from sneaking up on them. What about America? What about the West, this great bastion of democracy? We're going to see America want to promote capitalism, promote democracy, promote trade through the world. Do you remember what that's called? Promoting trade to end future wars. We talked about it a few chapters ago. I'm sure you remember. FDR was a believer. Anyone remember now? Internationalism. The idea here is that if we can promote free trade to stop future wars and Great Depressions, then ideally we'll see democracy and we'll see laissez-faire ideas take root in other countries. Countries, perhaps, like those that the Soviets want to control. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, Italy, blah, 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 blah. So, that's what both sides want. The question is, who gets what as World War II comes to an end? And Are they satisfied with it? So the time frame that we're talking about here in today's video is going to be 1945 up to about, let's say, 1953. That's the time frame for our conversation for this video. Now, let's see how these desires play out, shall we? All right. Well, what we're gonna see here is that there's gonna be tension between these two sides as they try and get what they want. And we're gonna see the communists and the democratic countries, I can't even keep that up, we're gonna see them struggle over what to do with Germany, Berlin, and other reacquired or reconquered nations. What do we do about those groups? That's going to be the idea, right? What do we do? We're going to see Germany and Berlin kept weak. We're going to see a declaration of liberated Europe emerge. And we're going to see Poland, Romania, and other countries forced into communism. And this is going to really kind of be the beginnings of the Cold War. So keep your eye out for this as the ways in which this tension, this Cold War is going to shape international relations. So setting the stage, how does all this kind of happen? What we're going to see is at a conference in Yalta, which is going to be in the Soviet Union. You'll see USSR, that's Stalin, FDR for America. You're going to see Churchill for Britain. Agree to issue something called the Declaration of Liberated Europe. And here's the concept behind that. The concept for the Declaration of Liberated Europe is that all of the countries that Germans have conquered, and really that's quite a lot, right? That's going to be this whole area, right? At some point in time had been controlled by the Nazi powers, including that area up there, right? So we have huge swaths of territory that the Nazis have controlled. And the Declaration of Liberated Europe says you get to choose. We're not going to tell you what kind of government you want. Do you want a communist government, a red government? Or do you want something different? Do you want maybe, I don't know, do you want a democratic government? A blue government? What is it that you would prefer? So the Declaration of Liberated Europe, its purpose is to basically say to countries that, look, we get it. You were conquered by the Nazis. Now you get a choice in your own future. What do you want to have happen to you now that you have your freedom? Oh, wait, hold on. Second thing it determines is what to do with Germany. And we had said we would divide Germany, but nobody really talks about what that division looks like. So this division's going to look like what you see here. Germany is going to be broken up into 4 major zones. One zone will be governed by the British, another zone by the French, another zone by the Americans, and another zone by the Soviets. It's only fair, right? But we also agree to something else. The biggest, most important city in Germany, Berlin. We're going to divide that too. So here you see Berlin again divided into different sections. Soviet, American, British, French. Each gets a section of Berlin, each gets a section of Germany. Remember the Soviet desire. Keep Germany weak. This is one way to do that. By dividing Germany, by dividing Berlin, we can keep Germany weak so it can't rebuild and threaten us anymore. Those in its biggest bones are what we discuss at Yalta, that nations can choose their own existence, and Germany can't. Germany will be kept weak through division. The last thing that's important to note here is that this is the time, just as Europe is falling and Japan will fall soon, that Roosevelt dies. And that guy right up there, just above my right ear, is who takes over? Harry Truman. Truman and FDR have very different views on the Soviet Union. FDR says, I kind of like the Soviet Union. I think Stalin's a good guy. I think I can control him. Truman says, FDR, are you crazy? FDR, you can't control Stalin. Stalin's crazy, man. He doesn't trust the communists at all. So what I want you to do for our lesson tomorrow, write down Truman. Put a sad face underneath it. Don't tell anybody. Now pay attention because we're going to keep going. So we've seen a couple of ways here, and that the Cold War has already shaped international relations, haven't we? We've already talked about this one right here, divide Germany and Berlin to keep it weak, so it's not able to strike out at the Soviets. It was definitely a Soviet desire. And we've also seen the Declaration of Liberated Europe, this idea that we should allow these other countries to choose their form of government, unless, of course, you're Germany, which will divide you to keep you weak. So on this slide, what we're going to see is something a little bit different. We're going to see this issue of what happens to those other countries in a little bit more detail. So we're going to begin our story here with Poland. Now, why Poland? Because as World War II was coming to a close, Stalin actually refused to let Poland choose its own form of government. He forced it to become communist. So there were supposed to be elections there in Poland to allow it to choose whether or not it wants to be communist or whether it wants to be democratic. The Declaration of Liberated Europe, right? We just talked about that. But Stalin doesn't permit those elections to be held. He forces it to become communist. He says, sorry, you're going to be communist. So from 1945 on, we're going to see Poland become a communist country. We're going to see that pattern happen in a variety of other countries around Europe, especially Eastern Europe. We're going to see it here in Romania, just to the south of Poland. In 1947, the king of Romania, who's actually this man right here, we're going to see him pressured into creating a communist government. We're going to see that happen in a variety of places. We're going to happen to see it in Bulgaria, 1944, Yugoslavia, 1946. It's going to happen all throughout Eastern Europe. You can see it there with all of those countries, the years that they became communist. None of them allowed to choose fairly, legally, what they wanted to be, democratic or republic. So as World War II is coming to a close, Germany's already been defeated, and we're still dealing with this issue of the Japanese. Harry Truman is going to come right out and say to Stalin that you're violating the Declaration of Liberated Europe. It's not permitted. Stalin says, what are you going to do about it, eh? What are you going to do, mate? You're going to do something about it, are you? Are you? I don't think you are. I don't think you're going to do nothing about it at all, are you? And he's right. There's not much we can do because we need the Soviets on our side if the war in Japan drags on. But this is a turning point in the Cold War. This is the beginning of our relationship with the Soviets going, so at Potsdam, after Stalin basically ignores Truman's accusations, we're going to see another conference. Potsdam is in the area of Germany. Everyone gets together again. Truman, Stalin, Churchill, we get together. And Truman says that Germany should be allowed to recover. We should let Germany become a strong economic nation again. We can divide it up, that's fine. But let's let it economically recover. Let's let it become a strong nation again. Stalin wants a weak Germany. Remember that? Remember American desires, laissez-faire, capitalism, free trade, internationalism? That works if we allow Germany to become strong again economically. But Stalin says no. Stalin says Germany should owe him the money, baby. Kick over that cash. Kick over that cash to the Soviet Union for all the damage that you did to our country when you invaded. There's an argument over this. It's a pretty heated argument. The Soviets want a weak economic Germany. They want reparations. We don't. We want internationalism. We want free trade. We want capitalism. So what's the outcome? We agree to give some reparations to Stalin and the Soviets, but only a little. And at the same time, what Truman does is he drops a hint and he says, hey, Stalin, just want to let you know something. We have a new and incredibly destructive weapon. We do. I just want you to know that, all right? And Stalin says, no, seriously, dude, what is it? Can I have it? And Truman's like, I'm not telling you what it is. I just want you to know we have it. And Stalin, being paranoid, starts to wonder and starts to realize that Truman, he's not like FDR, who'd pretty much give Stalin whatever he wants. He realizes that Truman's playing for keeps. The other side effect of this is he ticked off Stalin Nobody ticks off Stalin. This is the guy who, when his son killed himself, said he couldn't even do that right. You don't do this to Stalin. Stalin becomes furious, and we're going to begin to see the emergence of something we'll call the Iron Curtain and satellite nations of the Soviets. This split between what will become democracies in Western Europe and communist countries in Eastern Europe. The Soviets start to do a number of things after Truman kind of makes this veiled threat that things are going to go bad, that we have this new and awesome weapon. Some of the things that they're going to do is keep their army in Eastern Europe so that there's no way the declaration of a liberated Europe can ever take place. So those countries that are in Eastern Europe, countries like Poland and Romania and Yugoslavia and Bulgaria, all these countries that you can see on the map right down there, those countries are not going to get the option to choose. They're going to become, forced over time, communist. We're going to see them and those communist governments in those countries begin to repress people, and they're going to become something that we call satellite nations. So what's a satellite nation, and how does it work? The concept here is that these are nations that are politically, economically, and socially dominated by a stronger country. So I want you to think of the USSR as me. Oh yeah, flexing. Oh yeah. That's the idea. Super strong. And around it, rotating around it like satellites around the Earth. Get it? Satellite nations. Rotating around it are these other countries of the world that they control. Czechoslovakia, Albania, Yugoslavia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Poland, East Germany, etc. These countries revolve around the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union says, jump, you jump. In Soviet Russia, we tell you to jump. And Czechoslovakia says, how high would you like me to jump, Mr. Soviet Union, and when can I come down? The idea is that these satellite nations have to follow Soviet policies. Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of Britain, is watching all of this as the late 1940s and early 1950s begin. And he's in Ohio, actually, for a speech. Winston Churchill talks a bit like this, and he says at this speech in Ohio, I'm sorry, not Ohio, Missouri, my bad. He says that there's an iron curtain descending across Europe. The idea here is that there is now an official division between the East and the West, between freedom and communist dictatorship. And it's an actual physical wall. You can see here actual physical blockages, right? From east to west. Obstructions, barbed wire, electrified fences, tank traps, mines, guard dogs, guard towers, machine guns. These things are real, actual obstructions splitting the East from the West. It's a symbol, and it describes the Cold War for the next 50 years, 43 years technically. So what the Iron Curtain ends up looking like is an actual fence of guard dogs and everything else that stretches down along the area between the East, which is communist, dictatorship, government control, and the West, democracy, capitalism, people in control, free trade, internationalism, etc. There's going to be a lot of repercussions because of this. And in our next video, we'll begin to talk about what those repercussions are. Capital.